I think once again the harassment of sexual minorities by the criminal justice administration is a part and parcel of the way Section 377 operates in reality. Because what happens is because of Section 377 exists, it gives enormous power in the hands of the police. And what the power it gives in the hands of the police is basically to say that, see, we will file a case against you under 377. We will tell your family members that you're gay or that you're lesbian or that you're transgender, and we'll tell your family members that you're doing these horrible things. And if you don't give us money, if you don't have sex with us, we will out you to the entire world. So that's the argument they use. They use that particular argument to blackmail people, to sexually harass, abuse LGBT people. So there is very clearly a case of police harassment, and the way we see it in India, a large part of the harassment flows from the fact that we have this particular law in place. Struggle against what would be called the anti-sodomy law in any part of the world. In the US, for example, we had a decision called Bowers vs. Hardwick, which in 83 or 84 held that the police can go into the private home of a person and arrest them if they are engaging in the act of homosexual sex. It was only as late as 2003 that the US Supreme Court overruled its own decision. So in that sense, we are very well aware that the Supreme Court might give a decision which might not be positive. But the idea is that if the Supreme Court does come out with such a decision, it will be an extremely unpopular decision. Only for the reason that the world has changed dramatically. We've seen the fact that South Africa has a provision on no discrimination on grounds of sexual orientation. We've seen the fact that Nepal has taken several steps forward, and who knows, tomorrow Nepal could in its constitution could have a provision saying no discrimination on grounds of sexual orientation. It would be a huge embarrassment for India. If, for example, the Indian Supreme Court comes out with a decision which says that two policemen can enter the private home of any person and prosecute them for having sex in the privacy of their homes. As I was saying, the work I do in India has been as a human rights activist, as an activist on the rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people, and as a human rights lawyer as well. And I came to Nepal to try and understand what is happening in Nepal with respect to the rights of LGBT people, lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people. And I think the idea is to learn what is happening in the Nepali context. Because I think there's a certain kind of a vibrancy and life in the Nepali situation today, which might compare quite favorably to the situation in India. And that is precisely because the debate in Nepal today is on how can we get in the words of sexual orientation or gender identity within the Nepali constitution. And that is a dramatic step forward for the whole of South Asia. Because in India till today, in all the work which we've been doing, all we've been saying is let's get rid of a criminal law. At no point in time have we been able to make the point that the Supreme Court, that the Indian Constitution should include sexual orientation or gender identity as a ground of non-discrimination. So in a sense, my interest in seeing what is happening in Nepal is to see whether Nepal can really provide that kind of an example to the rest of South Asia, saying that we're going to be progressive, we're going to show the rest of the world what the idea of inclusive human rights is. I think the situation, as far as say Nepal or India is concerned in terms of the discrimination faced by sexual minorities, I think there's a broad range of similarity. There's a broad range of similarity in the fact that, for example, transgender people in Nepal and in India are victims of police and state abuse and violation. There's a broad range of similarity, possibly in the sense that discrimination in terms of society, in terms of family, against lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people. I think the issue of difference, which is the interesting issue, is to see how does the Nepali state and society respond to this particular challenge that one section of their people are not being guaranteed any rights. Will Nepali society and state respond in a way which is positive, which is to say that we will, in our constitution, include sexual orientation, gender identity as grounds of non-discrimination, and thereby set an example of a more inclusive notion of what the idea of human rights is, or what it is to be human. I think this is among the initial steps which are being taken in terms of building those connections between what's happening in Nepal, what's happening in India, what's happening in Sri Lanka, what's happening in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Maldives and Bhutan, to get a sense of how do we network or build these connections between these various struggles in other parts of South Asia. And the progressive voice, as of today, purely remains Nepal. And because Nepal is taking the debate one step further. Nepal is talking about the constitutional change which has not happened in the rest of South Asia. I think that is the process which should start now, when we start building those connections between Nepal and India, learn from each other in terms of strategies which are being used, contribute to each other's strengths, and learn from each other's mistakes and weaknesses. And part of our interest or our connection with Nepal is also to see how the present case, which has been filed by I think Blue Diamond Society, asking for the rights of transgender people, is going to go in the Nepali Supreme Court. And how is it that we from India could help with this particular case? And there, for example, we have a little bit of experience, particularly with the fight against the law in the Indian context, and that I think provides a concrete way in which we can work together on one issue as a starting point. I think the key argument one will have to make if you are talking about sexual minorities to the concerned authorities, be it people who draft the constitution, be it judges, be it lawyers, or be it common people, is that sexual minorities are human beings like everybody else, and whatever rights accrue to every other human being has to accrue to sexual minorities. And that is the position in international human rights law, that's a position in Nepali law, and that's a position in Indian law. So the clear message is really this, that sexual minorities should be treated as full human beings, and that's the only thing which will give human rights a more inclusive meaning and definition.